can do that better. Oh, hi. I'm the True Eyes Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. Today, we're going to talk a bit about Tamers. Tamers was really one of the great series of Digimon. It dealt with a lot of dark subject matters like depression, suicide, and how we deal with loss and how we grow from other bonds. It was a really, really good show. It was tightly written. I really did love it. And I understand why people really enjoy it. Because it really understood the idea of, yeah, it's a show for kids, but you don't have to write down to them. However, there are problems with it, and one of them, in my mind, the biggest problem, and it actively hinders some of the show's deeper themes about bonds, and how we grow with them and learn from them, that being the character of Rio. Yes, seriously, he is actually the worst aspect of the show. He is such a non-entity of the show. So much so that you could actively remove him, and nothing would be lost since he doesn't matter to any of the plot points of the show. Seriously, he just appears, and his backstory is so haphazard that you have to wonder what they were thinking when adding him. I mean, for God's sakes, he somehow bio-digivolves with no explanation of how he did it without the character arc that he should have had, if anything, that is necessary for that transformation. He just gets it. And sad part is, they really could have made it more amazing, or even tied it into his backstory to make this story even more amazing. But they didn't. Now, why am I mentioning Tamers and even Rio to begin with? Well, that's simple. See, basically Rio was introduced to the show because he was popular from the game series on the wonderswan. Mentioning the wonderswan was an oddity at a time. It was made during the time where Nintendo had the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance out, and Bandai for some reason thought they could try to fight Nintendo in the handheld market. Which, they did fine if anything, not as good as GBA at all, but overall still good. Though this bad boy still had a lot of exclusives to it. Like a lot. Seriously, there's a lot. Like the Mega Man.exe games that were on it, and the Guilty Gear games. Yes, seriously, and they actually work for some godforsaken reason. God, Arc System is weird like that. Now that makes you all wonder, where am I going with this? Well, we gotta talk about some games now. Well, you see, Bandai owns all the rights to the Digimon games, so why not have a few exclusives on it too? Those games being the games where Rio comes from, and how he got popular from them. Though the latter part confuses me since that doesn't ever explain how he got popular to begin with, since, to be clear, these games suck. I mean, they suck horribly. The Tag Tamer ones was so bad, I legit stopped playing it, and I don't think about it for a moment that I regret it. Now, I really want you to think about that for a moment. For those who don't know, I have beaten Sonic 06, Ride to Hell Retribution, and Final Fantasy 13, and if you know anything about me, I despise this shit. So when I say that this game made me quit, you should know how boring it was for me. Really boring. But I have gone on for too long. Let's begin the wonderswan games, or in my case, the Millenniummon Saga. The game begins with our main character Rio playing on his new computer, chatting up with his friend. Then suddenly Agumon appeared for some reason. And it's from the Adventure series, to be clear. Agumon explains that during the Adventure thing, they were just, doing their thing. Till one day, Machinedramon, and no, not that one, and Chimeramon DNA Digivolved to become Millenniummon, and he pretty much somehow destroyed the timeline, has brought back the main villains from all the rest of that series, Devimon, Edamon, Myotismon, yes, I know it's Vodmon, but still, and Piedmon. Yeah, let's actually talk about Millenniummon. Millenniummon is a strong threat, and in fact, he was actually brought back into Adventure series through the Digimon reboot. And, well, at first I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Maybe they'll actually try to do maybe like a sequel series and actually, tie it into the actual series. Nah, he's just there because literally the show power creeped so early on that if they didn't find Millenniummon, it would be kind of weird if they didn't. Because he's like one of the only big threats the digital world has. And I mean like, real big. Just so you know.
Anyway, they also called all the Digidestins, and yes, using English terms, it's easier for me, and being frank, the Chosen Children name was kinda stupid, and the Digidestin kinda flows through the tongue better, if anything. Again, anyway, they got all captured, except Jedi helped with Agumon and getting him out, though he was the only one who got away. He also hands us Tai's Digivice, and for some strange reason, it doesn't allow us to Digivolve Agumon and the other Digimon, but only capture new ones, like Pokemon. And what made it weirder was that, yeah, you can recruit them, but any new Digimon are kinda not that useful, and I just usually stick to the Digimon I already had, since training new ones really doesn't help that much. But let's talk about the gameplay, since that's what's actually going to be happening a lot of the time. The game is a tactics game of the most simple kind. Yeah, I reference Pokemon for a reason, because I consider Pokemon Conquest to be a very, very simple tactics game. Somehow, this is simpler. And maybe it's my Pokemon bias that's kind of saying that I enjoy Conquest more, even with its simplistic gameplay. It's still weird. It's pretty much the bare basics of a tactics game. Throw your strongest units at the weak units and then just destroy them all. That is it. Hell, I mostly autoplayed the entire game because none of it was interesting. In fact, I watched all of O2 just to get details from the show to see if there was issue with the timeline, since that's gonna become an issue in a moment. Trust me on this, it's weird. I'll at least say there's an interesting idea here with the variable moves. Basically, you have a few Digimon together, and those Digimon can actually then use a concept move of an evolution of a Digimon they both have some relation to. Then, they can use that move whenever they want as long as they have feed point. That's it. Which there is another concept that I do like as well, where basically you can transfer these variable moves to other Digimon as long as they've seen it a few times and learn it. However, they suck. They're not powerful enough to actively do much, so you're just better off just throwing them to another Digimon. The only variable moves that are actually any good are the healing ones, which are always good because, you could always heal. But my core problem with the combat is that it's so boring. Nothing ever gets interesting. In fact, the first battle is already automatic. Yeah, there are also shots, but they're not interesting enough. The only good ones are the shop ones where you get healing items. There's also Penguinmon, who's multiplayer centric, which makes him automatically useless. Though then again, he is a penguin, so he's already useless to begin with. It just makes him even more useless. I mean, the only thing that was actually interesting about this game was the story, and it's never focused on at all. I mean, for goodness sake, the Digidestin are in the game. They don't do anything at all. They're just here, say hi, take our Digimon, then just go away for no good reason. Even though I know for a fact that most of them would join in a heartbeat just to help their friends. What the heck? Anyway, at the end you either fight Machindramon or Chimeramon depending on which version. Yeah, I'll explain that in a moment. They fuse together into Millenniummon and you just beat them off because you have the Veedramon version, which Veedramon is overpowered in this game, so much so that if you use him, you pretty much won. Mostly, unless you don't use healing items for some reason.
Anyway, you know how it goes down. We defeat Millenniummon, yada yada yada. Boring, boring, boring. Seriously, it was that just boring because there's really not a lot happening. And it's even worse in the sequel.
So now Digimon Tag Tamers is where one actually needs to ask why it's important. Well, it actually introduces many plot points in O2 that are never elaborated on. Seriously, Ryo's in the show for some reason, and he's never explained, ever. He's just an Easter egg, I'm guessing. But this game is actively that canonical that if you did not play this, certain plot points don't make sense. I'll explain these plot points that are never explained as we go along, so we can be clear on that. The game begins with Ryo heading to Ken Ichijoji's home. Yes, the Digimon Emperor's home. And this is also happening during our War Games OVA, or the movie if you prefer. They are watching it, and this is the same Ryo from before, just to be clear, because some people say this is a different one, which is bizarre if you remember, that he was also in our War Games OVA. He was in Turkey. There is also an age difference. Yeah. And that's just a small one, or at least something so noticeable that you had to wonder what they were thinking. Anyway, time passes, as we learn that the digital world is in trouble again, as this time, Diabolomon's back, which is kind of freaking weird when you remember that he later does come back for the other OVA. Just saying. This time, Ken comes with Ryo to go to the digital world, until they defeat him and find out it was actually a copy made by, who else, the returning Millenniummon. And he's out for blood this time, as he somehow turns Tai and Agumon to stone. Yeah, they were here for some reason, don't ask. Somehow he splits the digital world in half, kinda like in Kingdom Hearts 3D. Yeah, and it gets weird that that's not the only time I'm gonna reference 3D. It's weird. With Agumon gone, Ryo gets Vmon and Ken gets Wormmon, though it's never stated if these are the same ones from the series. I like to say yeah, but maybe Vmon just forgot, maybe? I don't know. This is where some other plot points become weirdly confusing because this game has to be canonical. Ken never got his D3 device until after he went to the Dark Ocean. So, what? It's also weirder that he forgets all this stuff, even though this is before the Dark Spore stuff, and trust me, I'll get to that in a moment. Anyway, after a lot of filler of nothing happening again, you soon reach Millenniummon, but you can't beat him. Wait, what? Yeah, to beat Millenniummon, you need to get the Digi-Egg of Desire and use it to reveal his true form, Moon Millenniummon. And to be blunt, he's basically Lucemon Chaos Mode, but scarier, cause his power actually allows him to just break everything, time and space. While he doesn't carry the digital hazard sign to show off how dangerous he is, well, that's before the series Tamers actually made that a thing, but also there's a difference between them because, like, giving an example, Magitramon is more destabilizing data on a fundamental level, while Moon is just literally breaking down the fundamental rules of reality. Just to clear that up. Anyway, you defeat him, and his death created something that the franchise really never explained or even explain where it came from. Unless you look at the wiki. You see, the defeat of Moon Millenniummon created the Dark Spores. Yeah. And they pretty much caused all the plot of O2. That's something, I guess. Yeah, and it's not helped with the plot also making this entirely make no sense at all, as it's hard to explain what's wrong with it here without going overboard, as it does not help with the plot. Because, oh good lord. Just note, this can't possibly happen, because Tai would remember this happening. Or any of the Digidestins for that matter. Unless they want to say that this is some sort of alternate take on that route. I'm guessing. But I refuse that because that's the idiot's way out. Not the clever way out. Because if you're going to use a plot point, at least address it and explain where it came from, because it can't come from Venomiotismon. He doesn't even know where it comes from. I'm sorry for going on for so long, but to be fairly honest, this game is so boring that talking about the game's story and how it ties to O2 is far more interesting than actually talking about the game. The gameplay is now just a simple turn-based RPG that's but somehow makes it even more boring than the last game because it's now even more tedious since combat speed is slow, and I mean dreadfully slow, to a crawl with these unskippable battle scenes that just serve no purpose. Seriously, it got that annoying. It does nothing to make combat really interesting. It's just there to waste your time. I dare say that I spent more time on these cutscenes than anything else in the game mostly. Or at least like 40% of the game. Because it's that bad. It made me legit quit the game. The best way I can describe this game's problem is that there is no real progression, or at least nothing that makes me say, I'm getting better. No, nothing at all. It's just a dull plateau till you hit the next one, where reaching the next one is just a slog, and I mean a true slog. I mean, like, I didn't even get any Digimon past the champion level, even after 40 fusion level, and it was an annoying grind to get them there, and that's at a decent pace. That's not intrusive, if anything. And god, I have to talk about the fusions now. Okay, so instead of digivolving or levels for some god-forsaken reason, they did Digifusion, where basically to get a better Digimon, you need to fuse two Digimon so they can become stronger. And yes, it is annoying and pointless since There are also Digi-Eggs that can be used, and it's sort of decent. I never used them because I didn't know about them until way later after this video. And I was so burnt out on the game that I just didn't even want to attempt it. But basically, the Digi-Eggs will allow for an easier time since they can deal a lot more damage than most Digimon for some reason. I don't get it. Though Ken has a harder time because Wormmon doesn't get his Digi-Egg of kindness. Yeah, that's actually a thing. Yeah, I'm gonna mention the CD dramas now, because that's a thing. Because the CD drama is where it actually comes from, and somehow Davis, I don't know the details because I didn't really want to listen to it, becomes another Digimon Emperor. Yeah, that happens. And the CD dramas are weirder, and it won't be the last time where I'm mentioning them. Honestly, the idea of the gameplay is not that bad, it's just that the grind for everything is so boring that I just cannot care. I mean, for example, the DP idea, where basically moves do cost DP, all of them, but after a while, you can use weaker moves with no DP cost, that are still very weak, but overall are a better idea sometimes than using the stronger moves early on. But you can easily recover those since you can have a lot of items, and getting money quickly from this game is not that very hard. Or grinding out a lot of max floppies from Ken's side, since for some strange reason, his side, you can get a lot, and I do mean a lot of max floppies. I don't get it. I would comment more on the gameplay, but there really isn't that much to say. It's just a slightly tweaked version of the last game, and that wasn't very interesting to begin with. And this game's just the same, if not more boring, because it's wasting more of your time. And honestly, the sequel is only slightly better because it's more about not wasting your time. Because at least you don't have to go through the dungeons twice. Yeah, because Ken's a thing in the game, so you have to play through his side, making it even more tedious since there's nothing different about either side.
Now, you would think the sequel would be better, but actually it's kind of worse if anything because it really didn't do anything. It's pretty much the same game. Only shorter because they cut out Ken for some reason, but it doesn't really matter.
For whatever reason, the digital world is having a tournament arc, because that's fun. Also, Millenniummon's back again, because that's fun again. Though the tournament arc is kind of a lie, as we later on learn that it was there just to trick us so that we could be trained back to our peak so we could actually handle Millenniummon again. Rio's kind of bummed out about this, but I'm like, why did they even lie? Since they could have just said, hey Rio, we need to train you up so you can handle Millenniummon again, because he's back. Which is like, why not? Also, they explained that the 4 celestial Digimon basically made the Digi-Eggs for some reason. Also, strangely enough, this game ends on a cliffhanger where basically, after we defeat Millenniummon again, a huge explosion happens and, well, Millenniummon is considered dead, and also Rio. Nobody knows what happened to Rio, though we'll get to that in a moment. But let's talk about the gameplay, and it's pretty much the same gameplay from before, just maybe slightly improved. Just slightly. I mean, there are minor changes like removing the difference between high, medium, and low heals, and the Digi-Eggs can just be bought entirely without the shells being needed, because yeah, those were a thing. Heck, Digi-Eggs have more purposes than just being able to armor Digivolve. Now they can actually give you new moves or more resistance to certain attacks. Which in my mind is an actually good way to make the Digi-Eggs more important to the gameplay. Though still a vast majority of them are not that useful. I mean, like reducing noise attacks. I still don't know the difference between a noise attack and a bubble attack. I know they say it, but still. Also, strangely enough, the tournament is only like a few battles in the game, which is also weird that you don't even need to win. Yeah, I actually seriously lost to Mimi. Mimi, of all people, and was allowed to continue on. But the issue I had was that I could have easily won any of their fights if I was allowed to control them in the combat. Because for some strange reason, the deaths, for whatever reason, and I have no idea to this day, basically, we're not allowed to control them while in the tournament for some reason. I don't get it, it never made sense, and it was stupid.
And that's pretty much the problem. These two games are the exact same with not much of a difference to make them actually enjoyable to play. It's just that you kind of wonder why they even bother making a sequel if they didn't really bother to make that many improvements. I mean, they did make improvements, but not enough.
I want to mention that repeating gameplay is not any real issue for me, but it's more of the issue of that the gameplay was not improved in any manner of speaking to make it more enjoyable. I mean, like, I like the Dynasty Warrior games, but they usually improve upon things in the game to make them more fun to enjoy. But since it's the same game with not much of improvements, well, yes, there are improvements, they're not enough to make the game overall feel better. You still got the slow down attacks, you still got the story that doesn't really matter that much, and you really don't have much else to play for. I would also complain again about the weird use of the Digidestins, as they are never used except as placeholders for fights. In fact, I was actually fighting Thomas, one of the Digidestins that was kind of from the movies again, where actually, for some strange reason, and I don't know what caused it, my game crashed and bugged out, where I had to restart everything, and I just said, you know what, I'm good. And I feel no regret doing it.
But you would think that the Millenniummon Saga would be over, but no, it's not. There's actually one more game, and since it's not translated, I refuse to play it. Sorry, it's just not my thing to play non-translated games. Mostly. But my point is that being, there is one more, and ironically it's the best one out of the 4.
This one starts off with our new partner Digimon, Monodramon. This game also explains a bit about the origins of the digital world. I'm not even kidding. We actually meet the first computer and the start of the digital world, which is formed into multiple realities, and Millenniummon is at it again trying to do his own thing, as he wants to basically take over the world. Of course. And at the end, we actually meet Zen Millenniummon, the final form of Millenniummon, who actually kind of reveals a secret about why he keeps coming back, and it was hinted at the last game, and basically it's kind of shocking but makes way too much sense. See, the reason why Millenniummon keeps coming back and it has a connection to Ryo is that he's actually Ryo's actual partner Digimon. Yeah. How do you ask? Well, simple. Monodramon is his partner Digimon. Yeah. Basically, Monodramon is his partner, but the wait was so long, well, time crushed us all, and well, that waiting made it look very painful. And he really couldn't handle it anymore. An example of this is Gatomon from the original Venture series. She waited a very long time and digivolved to Gatomon, so I don't see any difference or contradictions here. While trying to defeat Millenniummon, Monodramon gets an idea and, well, basically DNA digivolves with him to try to stop him and, well, becomes another Digi-Egg, thus ending the threat of Millenniummon forever. And the game, for some strange reason, gives us a choice, and this one's very odd. Basically, it asks us whether or not we want to return to the adventure world or go to the tamer world, which for some strange reason he goes for the tamer world. I mean, it's a good choice, but still. And just to round out this adventure a bit, let's just explain what happened after this. During the time of his new adventure in the new world, he becomes a good Digi-Card battler, and after winning a tournament, he actually meets Cyberdramon. Yeah, and he basically tells Ryo he wants to become stronger, and Ryo just goes like, might as well. He doesn't know somehow, which is weird because he has to have known, because this is, again, the same Ryo from the games, because there are certain plot points in the game where they need to be there. Because they keep referencing the games again. Well, not directly, but still. And honestly, that could actually describe all my problems with these games. There is a lot of potential here for a great game, but it's never used and just thrown away for nothing. And you lose out of so much because these things could be so much more interesting.
And really, at the end of the day, I really wanted to like all these games. I thought they were going to be good, but no, none of them are good, and possibly only the 4th one is actually decent. They all suffer from the problems of not interesting enough to actually carry you along the journey. And it's not even an interesting journey to begin with. Next time, I plan on, I usually try to plan these out a bit. But next time, we're actually going to do a good Digimon game. With Digimon World DS. Or Digimon DS Story. They try to do the world thing a lot with branding. It's weird.